Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
On this side of the law, on that side of the law. Who is weak, who is wrong, who is for and who's against the law.
All right, and welcome back to The Law Show. I'm Zach Spencer, and joining me in studio, Joe Murphy and Joe Battista, partners at MurphyBattista in downtown Vancouver, personal injury lawyers. And we talked before the break about insurance possibly going up by almost 5%, 4.9%. And when you have a new driver in your house, and you have the possibility of having a much higher insurance policy because they don't have years of experience to bring down the cost. I guess the maximum is 45% after a certain number of years. So that policy could be, say, $1,600 for an experienced driver, or maybe over $3,000 for somebody who's a new driver. I think a lot of people will try and bring that new driver into their policy to get the lower rate. Now, that sounds great if saving money every month, but it can be a real pitfall, can't it?
Zach, it can be a terrible pitfall. And a common situation is a young person saves up their money and finally has enough to buy a car, and they buy an old car, and then they discover the insurance is going to be
more than
$3,500 for the year, and they think, I just don't have that money. What's the alternative? And the alternative is put the car in mom's name, and mom becomes the principal driver, when in fact that's not the case. That's fine until you have an accident, and if there's an accident, and ICBC, and they look at this, they look at who the principal driver was, and if they determine that the principal driver was not the mother but the son or daughter, they will refuse coverage, which means they pay out the claims for anyone else injured in the accident, and then they turn around to the mother and the son and say, you owe us $80,000. So it's a disaster.
But I think this is happening more often than not.
It commonly involves from this kid who saved up the money to buy the car, but they say, I can't afford the insurance.
So just a question for you. So I'm 2 years away from this in our house. My oldest is 14. So starting to drive, and they'll be driving on a car that will be one of our cars, and they're learning to drive and getting their experience. So that's a different situation, right? So that's mom's car, but they're going to be taking it out 1 or 2 days a week, right?
Yeah, and the standard thing that ICBC asks you when you renew your insurance is there anyone under 25 in your household who will ever drive this car? And if you say yes, then it goes up into a higher rate category, and the premiums go up. But at least you know there's coverage if and when an accident occurs. And it's anyone in the household under the age of 25.
So the 5% deduction that they get every year for being an experienced driver with no claims, is that just years driving or years having a policy with ICBC? Do you know if that's the case? Because so that 2 years they're learning to drive using mom's car a couple days a week, does that go towards them getting a discount when it comes to getting their own car?
You know, I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either.
Yeah, I've always wondered that because I thought, when your kids are learning to drive and they're using mom's car or dad's car or whatever, are they collecting a discount?
Yeah, the other thing, Zach, if parents are thinking about putting the kid's car into their name, they should understand that in BC, the law says that if there's a bad accident, the owner is just as responsible as the driver. So if you get mom or dad as a favor to say, well, okay, let's put the car in my name, leaving aside the principal driver, and there's a bad accident and there's not enough insurance, then that mother or father is on the hook for the extra damages. Or if there's a policy breach, they're on the hook. So the idea that you're doing a favor is fine, but you got to look at the potential consequences. And in Canada, across Canada, the owner is just as responsible as the driver.
Now, what about the car is owned by mom or dad? They bought it, but they make the child the principal driver.
The key, Zach, is to properly disclose the true state of who owns it, who's going to drive it primarily, what it's being used for. As long as you disclose it properly and you're upfront about those things, you're okay. Mm-hmm. They want to know, obviously, the principal driver and what it's used for. The other one is use. If it's used for business, to and from work, to and from school, those are all important. Answer the questions honestly and truthfully so that you're properly rated for insurance. That's the one takeaway. The other takeaway is be sure that you have the right amount of insurance as well. When my son started driving, knowing that I would be responsible if they had an accident, I reviewed my insurance at that time, and I decided to increase it at that time. Not expecting they're going to get an accident, but I thought, here's a change in circumstances. They haven't driven before. I want to make sure that we're properly covered. So those are the two takeaways. Disclose the principal driver and the use of the vehicle, and have the right amount of insurance. If you do those two things, then you're protecting yourself as much as you possibly can.
All right, we're going to totally change gears, pardon the pun, about a previous show we had last month, and we had both of you in at that time as well, and we were talking about powers of attorney, and we touched on this a little bit, but in our final few minutes here, we wanted to cover some ground we missed on that last show, which is living wills. So what is the difference between a living will and a power of attorney?
A living will... It's an old term. It's now called an advanced healthcare directive, where you can put your wishes in writing as to what you want to happen should you unable to make decisions about your health care. And you can do that in a document. You don't have to do that in a representation agreement. You can do that in a document that, provided you had the capacity to make that document, those wishes will be honored, including the most important one would probably be to withhold life support or resuscitation if it was necessary. Those are the main things. Or if you had a disabling, a progressive disease that was eventually terminal, you want some direction as to your care. You cannot give instructions on assisted death. That's different. There's a distinction between withholding life support and actually initiating assisted death. No one can give that directive in advance, but the withholding of life support, your choices in that case, you can do that in writing. The other thing that's becoming more and more important is your living arrangements, should you become incapable. You may want to live in your house as long as possible with in-home help. And you want that as opposed to being put in a home where your support is provided in the home. That's becoming more and more important, where people who can afford to stay in their home, that's their choice, to stay at home with home care. You can put those type of things in this type of directive.
Now, what happens if you don't have that? If you just have the standard power of attorney, and if someone doesn't have this set up, this living will, what's the process to make those decisions?
Then it'll fall back on maybe a committee if it's necessary, or they will look at the prescribed pecking order for relatives to make those decisions. But again, they may not know what your wishes are. Mm-hmm. For example, your children may think that the best thing for you is to be in a home, mm-hmm. Because it's easy. They live far away. It's off their plate. They don't have to worry. But your actual wish is to remain in your own home with in-home help. If you haven't made that decision or made that known in advance, they may not know that. So it's a simple thing to do. There's an excellent website. You can Google Advanced Healthcare Directive BC. There's a very extensive website that tells you how you can do it yourself. And it tells you all the considerations that should go into making these decisions, who is the best person to make these decisions. And I'd encourage people who are at that stage that they're thinking of something like this to look at that website, and they'll find it helpful and quite easy to follow and to do your own.
But we want to make a distinction that is not the same as power of attorney. So this is something separate.
Yes.
Usually the power of attorney should be done with a lawyer, right?
Yes.
And this is something you can do on your own.
You can do it on your own.
Okay.
Yes.
So what is the website again?
It's I don't have the actual website, but if you Google,
what's the name of the
Advanced Care Planning Guide? It's the British Columbia government. It's under, if you Google that Advanced Care Plan Guide, BC government, it'll pop up.
Well, that's a good service.
Yeah.
I think that, so it's basically you just go through it step by step.
Go through it, And it gives examples, and it even tells you what you should be thinking about when you're making these type of decisions. It's actually quite a well-done website. It's about 30 or 40 pages.
So when you print that out and sign it, that is binding? Do you have to have a witness? And I'm sure...
Yeah, it's all the requirements are there.
Yeah.
It is to the extent that you have the capacity to do that. Again, it's like anything. You have to have the mental capacity to do it. But chances are, if you have the ability to go through and follow the website and fill it out.
If you can do the 30 pages.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, our final thoughts here in their last minute or so. We've covered a lot of ground here today. We've talked about soft tissue. We've talked about an ICBC rate possible increase and also the living wills here at the end. What's your final thought on, what your line of work is and people getting in soft tissue? What do you say to them? What's your advice?
Well, Zach, the advice we give to our clients is the more active they are, the sooner they get back to work, the better. People don't like to sit at home and have a sore neck and sore back. So be as active as you can, but rely on your doctor for advice on what you can do and can't do. The good news is most of these people fully recover, and our job is to make sure to facilitate they get all the treatment they need, because treatment can be very effective. The therapies can be very effective. Medications can be very effective, and we help them get in to see the therapists and doctors who can give that kind of treatment.
All right. Thank you. It's great to have both of you here. The partners at Murphy-Battista, Joe Murphy and Joe Battista, thanks very much for coming. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Zach.
And that's all the time we have for this Law Show. I'm Zach Spencer. We'll speak to you next time on CL 650.